Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the EvokeCast. I'm your host, Scott Johnston, and with me today is my good friend and alpinist, David Göttler, whom I've coached for about 10 years now. David just returned from a successful ascent of the Schell route on the Rupal Face of Nanga Parbat in Pakistan. Besides being a world-class alpinist, David is also an accomplished paraglider who regularly uses his wing to descend from climbs. On Nanga Parbat, he carried his wing and flew from near the summit to base camp in only about 30 minutes, while his partners skied back down over the course of a couple of days. During our chat today, we discuss his semi-alpine style ascent and what that means in terms of the ethics and transparency in a sport with no clear rules. We delve into his training, including looking back at how it has changed over the 10 years that we've worked together. When David first approached me about coaching him, it was to prepare him for an expedition to Shishapangma with the Alpine superstar speed demon Uli Steck. David was concerned about being able to keep up with Uli, who was then at the peak of his fitness just before his tragic death on Nuptse. David, like many of the athletes that come to us, was aerobically deficient. His journey to being as fit or fitter than some of the best alpinists in the world today is a reflection of how this type of training can work for everyone. We also talk about the challenges mountaineers face when it comes to nutrition and hydration. Overall, I think you'll find it an enjoyable conversation. And thanks for joining me again. So let's just dive right in.
So welcome, David. It's really good to have you back and back safely from your climb too, as well.
It's good, yeah. Thank you for having me, and of course, always good to chat to you.
So David is a professional alpinist and is sponsored by North Face along with several other companies. So he gets after it in the mountains a lot. He's also an aspiring marathon runner, and we've worked together to help him break 3 hours in the marathon a few years back. But anyway, we do have a long history of working together, and I think that's also something that's important for people to understand is that this coach-athlete relationship, the longer the two of us work together, the better the partnership becomes. The more we understand about each other, about how the training affects him, he knows more about what I'm expecting when we do these kinds of things. So it's really valuable that we have this long history of working together. So,
yeah, I mean, definitely that's something I really love. I mean, I love working long term with sponsors, but especially with you as my coach. I think if we look back how it started and how we really tried all this different stuff, and we kind of redefined it and really made it more and more specific. And also over the years we had time to really try different things and to know each other that well, I think brings a huge advantage to my at least fitness and outcome of how I can perform and train. And I think also for you it's quite nice that you know me so well.
And I want to relate probably a slightly embarrassing tale about you. I remember when we first started, you were definitely suffering from aerobic deficiency. And I remember lots of comments about, oh my God, I'm having to run so slow. So I think it's, even a very high level athlete like yourself can have this problem because you didn't really understand at that point how to train properly. And
for sure. I mean, just to give the listeners I started climbing when I was 7 with my father, and I was always in the mountains. Like mountaineering was my sport from age 7 to now, and I never did anything else. Like no other kind of team sport or athletic or anything else. And I was just kind of going for it, and I became a mountain guide. So I was like my living was always made out of the mountains in one way or another. And I thought I do training, but of course I I just did what was fun to do, and so and that completely changed when I started working with you. And by the way, it was for preparing and going for an expedition with Uli Steg to Shishapangma South Face. And so and that's when I suddenly started to really have this structured plan and really do real training and not just exercising alone.
Yeah. Yep. I remember there was a bit of anxiety before that. Am I going to be able to keep up with Uli and all of that?
Definitely.
That was a big motivator for you at that time to make sure you could keep up.
For sure, yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more then about, let's kind of dive into this recent climb and how you got there. I mean, to finally be on the summit. I know there's been a long journey for you with several attempts. So why don't you just give us some background on that?
Yeah, I mean, my Nanga Parbat kind of relationship started properly, I would say, in 2013 when Simone Moro, an Italian professional climber, invited me for a winter expedition to Nanga Parbat, and he went to and we went then together to the Rupal side, to the Schell route. And that was the first time when I saw this, what is considered the biggest face we have on our planet, if we're talking about elevation from the base of the wall of the face, like where the base camp is there, to the summit, which is the base camp is 3,600 meters. I don't know what it is in feet, and then 8,126 is the summit. So it's bigger than Everest and K2 if we talk in terms of vertical meters. And so standing there in like as this tiny dot under this face is so big. It's so impressive. I mean, you know it. You've been there by yourself, no? When was
Yes.
this? Which year was it? You were?
2005.
2005, yeah. Yeah, and so and it's really intimidating and you feel very, very small, but we tried in the winter and we had fixed ropes. There was another Polish team, and in this year I came up to around 7,000 meter, 7,200, something around this at the so-called Montseno col. This is like where then it goes over, like the lowest point where you can cross over from the Rupal side, where we've been to the Diemir side, the other side. And that's kind of when I fell in love with the route. I find the route really like super cool, how it goes, how it finds its way through. It's relatively safe from objective dangers. So you have in the first kind of 100 meters, maybe a little bit of a serac exposure, but you can really be nicely to the side. And then actually there's no serac above you, which I really, really like. And also there's no big kind of crevasse area. And you have to deal with rockfall, depends on the season and the year, but it's also something which you actually can mitigate pretty well with just like don't go when it's too hot and when the sun hits the face. And so 2013 was my first time. We turned around at, like it said, like 7,000 and a little bit. And then I tried it another time in the winter 21, 22 with Hervé Bamas, another Italian professional climber. And we just came to 6,000 because in the winter it was just, the wind was just always there and it was really, really difficult from the weather. It was just like the jet just never moved properly away from Nanga Parbat, so we had always this really high winds. And then I thought, okay, let's try to make it not as difficult as possible, and let's move to the summer, to the normal season. So then in the summer of 23, I was my first time in summer with Benjamin Vedrine. He's like this upcoming superstar, French superstar, incredible strong climber, and we managed to get to 7,400 just in the beginning of the traverse on the Diemir side. So we already went to the other side, but this was probably one of my most difficult times I had to turn around because I couldn't blame it on external factors like the weather, like the conditions. It was just really, it was just, I didn't feel it. My legs just didn't feel able to make it back. So we continued this endless traverse. And so I was trying to, eat a little bit more, put gels in. Benjamin made an amazing track. He did all the hard work on our summit day there. And we started also really low towards the summit. We just thought like, yeah, from the vertical meters, it's not much. Come on, we can start from like 7.1 or 7.2, something like this. And I just, after like a couple of hours of internal fight with myself and trying to improve, trying to feel better, I just had to pull the plug. And it was really painful to tell your partner, hey, sorry, I just feel too weak today. And there was not, it's not that I could say, hey, I have headache, I have like my stomach is not right, and or anything. It was just like I just felt not strong enough to pull that off in that year. And so we made the call, turned around, and Benjamin was so strong, he would easily, I think, probably, yeah, able to make it. But I sabotaged his summit on this day, which feels, yeah, really, it's hard and brutal, and definitely bruised my ego for a while. And but now, knowing how long it is, definitely I made the right call at this time. So I think it's really important that you yeah, listen to these kind of red lights which should pop up. And if you're experienced enough, I guess, and know how it normally should feel. I'm fortunate that I have this many experience and expeditions at high altitude, so I kind of know which range of suffering and how your body is kind of like what is normal. It's never fun in that way, but still there is like a certain, yeah, I think, red line I try not to cross. And so I came back then the next year in 24, and there my regular partner, Mikey Arnold, he had to leave at one point because we were just trying to, wait for a good weather window, and he had like a hard deadline in the end to finish the expedition. He left, and lucky me, there was Boris and Tiffan, these two French mountaineers, for the same objective, the same route as well, with skis, like Mikey, to climb it, and I could team up with them, and that was really, yeah, super good. Still, we didn't make it. We made it 100-meter higher compared to my last year with Benjamin, to 7.5, 50, something like this, just where this kind of traverse more or less ends with the difficulties. But we were just, again, too slow, and the snow were too deep, and it was too long. So again, we had to turn around, but we knew immediately that we want to come back the next year with the same team, because we felt it was a really good team. And that's how we ended up this year again there. And we did the same program more or less like last year, because I felt it should work, at least on paper, really well, which is something, of course, you never know. You always, you work out these best plan and the best scenarios, and all plan B, plan C if something goes wrong. But in the end, you fail, and you try to analyze and reflect, and there you need to be really brutal honest why it didn't work. But I was sure it was not because we had a wrong approach in the lead off, in the preparation, in the acclimatization. So again, we went to Nepal. We went to the same mountains there, Island Peak, and a 7,000-meter peak called Barunse. and we just did these in alpine-style as well. Barunze, we had no base camp. We just went from the last lodge. It's a long hike, and we could summit Barunze, which was really cool because last year as well I was not able to do that. So that was already like a really good start to our expedition, and also of course for the motivation and the morale of the team that we pulled in very like mediocre conditions, like zero visibility. We pulled off Barunze, there was nobody, no, and so that was really cool. And then we traveled directly from Nepal to Pakistan, and we're more or less immediately ready to attempt Nanga Parbat because we had a good acclimatization. So that's then we were ready on Nanga Parbat.
And had your plan all along been to fly from as high as possible for the descent? Because I don't know if people know, but David did fly down from the mountain on the summit day. So had that been in the plan all along?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always that I'm not a skier in that sense. I mean, I know how to ski and I train on skis and I'm a mountain guy, but this kind of terrain like deep skiing is not something I'm good in and interested in as well. And for me, flying is kind of the addition I really want to explore and bring to the mountain. And this was always my plan and my big dream to be able to fly down over one of these big mountains. And on the other hand, I know it's so it's it's so unlikely in a way that you have these perfect conditions you need. I mean, you need perfect conditions to go up, to climb these mountains, from the snow, from the weather, from all. But if you want to fly down, you need even this next better conditions and component, which is the wind, and not only the wind at the summit, but also the wind down in the valley. And so you need like there's like such a big puzzle piece which need again to be right to be able to do that. So for me, it's also mentally, I really always try not to think about it on the way up. I just try to kind of really put that to the side, because it takes so much energy away from me to always think if the conditions are now right or not for flying. Is the wind like weak strong enough from the right direction, and is down in the valley, is it now maybe too strong that I cannot land, and all of this. So I really try to put that aside and focus on the moment and just on the climb. And then on the summit, I'm kind of okay, and now I can put energy and into like this decision making process. So and yeah, like the last times I was there, it was always to not ride from the conditions, to fly even from 7.5 or whatever. And now, yeah, finally when we make it, our summit day was really such a good day from the weather this year. And there was just a little bit too much wind on the summit, and was too gusty. And in this altitude, the wing is really very sensitive to being launched, and for the takeoff as well. My brain, of course, is not as fast as down here, and the reaction time is just, I think, is way slower. So it was a little bit over my kind of limit, what I was willing to risk. So that's why I went a little bit further down with my friends. They started to ski from the summit, and I walked down, and then at 7,700 meters, there was this nice steep snowfield where I then was able to take off, and then fly down from that high altitude. First, like traversing the Deermere side, like where this long traverse back is, which my friends had to do, Boris and Tiffany, and then traversing over the Montseno Col to the Rupal side. And yeah, in 30 minutes, I was back in base camp. I was back for dinner. I landed right next to our base camp in this green meadow. And our cook and our kitchen boy were totally surprised because they didn't know that we were coming. while I was coming there, and they were like running towards me, and yeah, it was big moment of relief that worked, and I had dinner in base camp. It was crazy. Yeah.
That is amazing. 30 minutes after being on the summit or
Yeah.
after taking off. Wow.
Yeah.
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 And so, and then it took, you said, another couple days for your partners to manage to get down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there you see, like it took them 3 more days to get down, and that's due to the last day they needed really to wait again for the lower part to freeze overnight. So they could have been down a day earlier, but they had to wait for again for otherwise it would be too much rockfall in the lower part below 6,000 meters. And then on the towers they had to make a bivy, but we had prepared for that. We brought a tent, mattress, a stove, um, uh, up to even to the summit. We had it on the summit with us. We carried all the way, and so we were always able to, or whenever we felt okay, we are too tired, we need a break, we need to wait for the next day, that we are able to just like put the tent and be safe and recover a little bit. And they use this tent on the way back. They are in the towers at 7,650 meter, just before the really kind of, there are always then these small uphill sections, and it's brutal. It takes so much out of you, and you can't imagine. It's only like 50 meter up, and you think, hey, what is this? But up there, and after this long day, I mean, in the end, it took us from our last camp at 7,450 meter to the summit 14 hours. For comparison, from the South Col to the summit of Everest, it took me 12 hours. So it was a longer day just uphill, compared to Everest. And for me as well, it felt harder mentally, but as well physically than Everest. It was in the end, you had, I don't know, like I was at one point, I was really having a low, and luckily our team worked so well that whenever somebody had a low, because everybody of us was at one point in this 14 hours feeling really like, damn, I just want to kind of, turn around. But but lucky always the other two were just like going for it, and at that point, yeah, the others felt really good, and so they were just making the track and just going, and I tried to follow, and I felt, well, I'm really again feeling a little bit low in energy, so I banked in one of these bigger gels from Precision Fuel, and I really like them, and they have these big pouches, so where you can close the tab as well, so you don't have you can just eat as much as you feel and want, and that really worked for me at this moment really well, because I felt afterwards, okay, now I feel again having more energy, and yeah, so that was, yeah, like the summit day.
Yeah, and that interestingly on the nutrition side of things, I know that's much more, there's a lot more information today, and more people are tuned in to nutrition for these ultra endurance type of an event where you're out for many hours at a time. And I think that, I'm far from any kind of an expert on it, but I have been working with I'm coaching some athletes that are working with some very high level nutritionists that work with, Tour de France riders and other ultra runners. So I'm getting a little bit more knowledgeable on the subject, but certainly one of the things that I think pertains directly to you, David, that I hadn't understood as well as I probably could have if I'd been more interested in that subject, but is that when you go higher in altitude, your dependence on glucose for sugar goes way up. Your fat metabolism is just too difficult, apparently. So even though we like to be well fat adapted, and that certainly helps on, in some aspects of mountaineering, that certainly at really high altitudes like you're at, the sugar is what you need. You have to have that to keep moving.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I would love to eat even more, but I think what's the caveat and the kind of, the footnote on all this nutrition thing for altitude is that we try to do the same what the ultra runners, the Ironmans, the Tour de France people are doing, but we have this limitation so that we don't have aid stations. We need to carry our water for the whole day, and if we don't carry the water, we need maybe to stop always and melt again water, and takes endless time, melt snow into water, not melt water. And if I would love to eat like 100 grams per hour carbs, but in the end I would need to start for, like, if I plan for a 4-day ascent, I don't start, I can't lift my backpack anymore because I need to, it will be too heavy, it will be full of gels. And and so and then, like, if I eat more carbs, in the end I also need to drink way more, but I just know I'm not able to drink this much, and I try sometimes, and maybe I need just to really be there even more strict, and train this, and be better in drinking more, but I hardly manage to drink my 1.3 liter fluid, which I normally have, because I have this 750 ml like soft flask and a 500 ml Nalgene bottle. So and also I see when friends take more because they think they drink more, they never manage to drink more. Like they arrive in the next camp with like a liter still in their backpack, and you carry just this stupid weight there. And so I think it's easy on paper, and I every time I'm like, okay, I need to drink more, I need to eat more, but in reality somehow it's so difficult to improve it. And now, for example, I have like the third day where I really know exactly what I ate during the 2 camps, and I managed to get 60 grams per hour carbs, with a mix of gels and some juice, like these soft bars, and I'm pretty happy with that, and I felt really good. And yeah, so to improve that, and as well drink enough, I think it's really challenging.
What were you eating in the bivouac, so when you had your tent?
That's a good question, because this is so difficult what to eat there.
Yeah.
The appetite is just like not there, and every freeze-dried meal, I mean, it's so difficult to get down for me. So I I had now some really super easy plain food I just bought from the supermarket. This mashed potato flakes. You just add a little bit
Hmm.
water. You have mashed potato. I bring salt and pepper, like the small sachets you get on, I don't know, on airports or on some, fast food diners. Like you
Sure.
take some when you're in this. It's they're really good, and that's, yeah, there's something. I have this freeze-dried Japanese rice, which is totally plain freeze-dried rice, again just salt and pepper in it. I bring some small cheese with me, some, like, took works really well, this dry cracker but salty, is really good. And then now this time I really enjoyed to bring like clear soup, bouillon, like this kind of
Hmm.
cubes, like soup, and just like have this clear soup and put like some crackers inside these croutons with, some of this stuff. So that worked really well. And then again, I really some and I eat like a gel or something like this just in camp, because it's the thing which goes the easiest down, and has a lot of calories. So yeah, that's kind of the the things I'm able to eat there.
Yeah, appetite suppression is definitely a big problem at high altitude. And
Yeah.
so, did you lose much weight on this trip?
I didn't lose too much. I have to say I'm pretty happy on this. I mean, I lost for sure like a couple of kilos, but nothing compared to, for example, Everest, where I lost way more. So
Yeah.
here I'm really happy, and I think it's due to the fact that we had this the acclimatization in Nepal, where we stayed in a lodge where you can eat really well and a lot of normal food. Then these days in between Nepal and Pakistan, where we stayed for a couple of days in Kathmandu, you just kind of try to fill up your stores as best as possible with pizza, with just like good food, and then in on Nanga Parbat the base camp is so low, so it's 3,600 meters, that again you just don't lose constantly compared to when you're above, I don't know, in a base camp at 5,000 meters somewhere. So I think this helped a lot for this.
Yeah, I would imagine it did. Yeah, you've done this sort of acclimatization training camp many times now in
Yeah,
Nepal since I've started working with you, and they've evolved a little bit. Though I mean, 7, 8, 10 years ago, whenever the first one I worked with you on in Uli was like that. Yeah, it was a pre-Shishapangma or no?
yeah,
Or-
yeah.
yeah, and you guys, that was there was running involved in quite a bit of running there. But now have you shifted away from running at this camp and more climbing on purpose, or is it just that Uli liked to run, or what's made you move that direction?
No, it's a good question, and definitely it's not because I don't like running. I would love to run there, but I realized, I mean, there are like two types of training camps. You can go there, and sometimes I do this for just the sake of really training, not for doing a pre-acclimatization or an acclimatization. And when I do just training, I can go running. I can kind of, really like work myself in altitude, and you get mega tired back home, but you will have time to recover. But the moment I go and really need the acclimatization and go directly after to climb a 8,000 meter peak, then I really be super conservative in the way of like when to push there, and have a lot of recovery days and really respect this recovery time you need to not work yourself in the ground. And I think I mean, I haven't spoken, but the guys who did now try the FKT on Everest, and I think they just they did too much. I see so often that the people now, yeah, go there, do something similar, but they fall into the trap of like, hey, it's so nice to run around here, and now you feel slowly good in altitude, so let's move, let's do a fast time up and down, whatever. And it's so tempting, but if you're really objective is to climb a 8,000 meter peak, you need to be super careful with how far you push yourself out there. And I just remember that when I was with Kilian, we talked about it, and he had like way more emphasis on these recovery days, which I never thought he would do, but it's for a reason, I think. And so that's why I changed away, or I I focus now more on really the acclimatization when it's for 8,000 meter peak, and not on the kind of moving crazy around.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I've just seen this for over the years. I mean, I've done this mistake myself. I've seen you make this mistake as you go on an expedition, or it doesn't even have to be an expedition. Maybe it's a relative, but some sort of higher altitude climb, and you've trained really hard, you get really fit, and you get there and you're excited, you feel really good, and there's a temptation, like you're saying, it's you're in this beautiful environment, and maybe you're with people that you feel some little competition with, so you start pushing, and it doesn't feel like you're pushing, but maybe your heart rate's low, or you can say, well, I'm walking very slowly. How can this be pushing the pace? But what happens is your body is still struggling to get used to the altitude. And so when you have the stress of acclimatization piled on top of the stress of exercise as well, then it's overtaxing what your body can handle, even though it doesn't really feel so much like that. And so what I've told people, and I know you had a kind of you can explain more on this story, but what I've tried to tell people is you just have to go ridiculously easy when you first show up there. I remember working with, I was coaching Adrian Ballinger before his attempt on Everest, or his climb of Everest without oxygen. And, and he's been to Everest many times, always with oxygen though. And I just told him when he got to base camp, I think I set some ridiculously low heart rate for him. I said, for this whole first week, I don't want you to go above whatever 110 or something beats per minute. And he's walking around and he's even slower than the clients he's there with. But it pays off. And I remember with you, you had a kind of a light bulb going off one time when you went to Nepal with Monica, your wife, girlfriend, partner.
Yeah.
And you said, well, I'm just going to do all of my acclimatization hiking with Monica, who's not as fit as you, of course. And you said, well, this worked way better when you went then to the climb.
Yeah, I mean, this was then when I really could climb Everest in 22, and after it was my third attempt on Everest. So and the years before I was way more on this kind of, hey, I want to move and I'm super prepared and fit. So let's do like a super fast time on Island Peak, just because anyway I'm here and I'm fit and I want to climb Everest afterwards. And then when we trekked and did the acclimatization with Monica, I had all these days where we really just trekked super nice and easy pace. And there I had maybe one time on Mera Peak where I just did one day pushing up and down, but then I had nice long recovery. And so that's where I, like you said, like I had this afterwards, I really saw how much better I am when I'm doing it in that way and don't push there in like for, I don't know, 95% at least of the time. And for sure you can have a day where you a little bit play, but you need just to then account for enough rest days afterwards and make sure you get really a long recovery. And again, this recovery time is just so much longer in altitude compared to what you have down here. And this is the danger, because you feel after the same amount of time more or less recovered, and you sit in these lodges and you have this nice environment and you're like, "Ah, come on, like why should I sit another day here?" But it totally pays off.
Yeah, on the opposite end of that, I remember, I think it was the year you went there with Killian, that you went early. Killian stayed home and kept acclimating in his tent at home.
Yeah.
You went to the Khumbu a bit or before him, and I remember one day you were telling me, well, I felt so good. I went out and I did this really hard intervals uphill, and I was kind of going, oh shit, that wasn't such a good idea. But I didn't say anything to you at the time because I didn't want to hurt your mental state. But I was just thinking, oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and then I remember I paid bitterly. I had to go even further down to Pangboche. It's just at 4,000 meters, and stay there and I had like, I don't know, 4 days really doing nothing and just kind of recovering from that. So yeah, I faded right away. So I hope like people listen to that, they don't make that mistake and
Yeah.
take something away from it.
Yeah, when I think it was 2000, I think it was around 2000 or 2001, Steve and I were in Tibet. Steve House
Mm.
and I were in Tibet, and we were going into Cho Oyu, and it's kind of a long trek up a valley, you know, not super high elevation, probably 5,000, you know, I think base camp there is 5,500 meters or so.
Mm.
The valley's pretty flat, but on the hike in one day, Steve got really sick, like, you know, vomiting and having real
Mm.
problems. So I just said, hey, you drop your pack here. I'll come back and get it. Let's just get you to the camp. The next camp, we'll set up tent. And so, you know, he was stumbling along. We got to camp, set up the camp. And so I was feeling like you were feeling super fit before this trip. So what did I do? I dropped my pack. I ran, you know, 5 kilometers back to get Steve's pack. And then I ran back to the tent, to the camp. And I was a wreck for 3 days, you know, from running a few kilometers
Yeah,
at 5,000
altitude.
meters. Yeah, we have to be more respectful of that and the effect that it has on us. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people who haven't
for
much
sure.
experience at altitude
Mm.
don't respect it enough. And also, and again, because we typically in our business are able to make people very fit before they go on these
Yeah.
climbs. And so it's important that we give them this caution. Okay, just because you're fit, don't try to demonstrate that fitness down low on the mountain. Save that for the summit day.
Exactly. And I think the other thing, what is really important that I mean, you told me that I think one time or a couple of times probably, and that, you know, you don't lose your fitness right away. If you put like all this work consistently in before, you don't lose this in like 4 rest days in altitude. And
Yeah.
but that is kind of thing even I have. Like you sit there and you're like, oh my God, I just can look at my legs, how they shrink day by day because the muscles disappear. But yeah, for sure. And they disappear a little bit, but it doesn't go this fast. And so yeah, you should relax more in that way that your fitness won't disappear like in a blink of a rest day in altitude.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions about your ethics on these mountains, because I think that's
Mm.
something that people need to hear more about. You know, I know a lot of most of the people that are listening to this are going to be involved on, you know, some kind of commercial guided expedition. Um, and which is fine, as you and I have talked about many times. But it's a different kind of mountaineering than sort of the ethics that you adhere to. And I know you have some strong feelings about this. And where do you set your limits? What's the approach you take that makes you feel like, okay, this was a successful climb? You know, I know that you're very committed to doing these things on your own, unsupported. But why don't you expand on that a little bit, if you would?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to start with that the beauty in mountaineering in whatever form we do is that we don't have any rules, so we can make our rules by ourselves. But that brings a certain amount of responsibility of being, I think, very transparent and clear in the way we do things out there, because I think everybody who moves in the mountain knows exactly when they in quotations cut corners and make their life easier or use something which is like a different help or way of climbing these mountains. So I think, and for me this is the number one thing. I really try to be very transparent and clear. So when I climbed Everest, I think I was very clear like what help I got, that I used the fixed ropes, which other people, you know, there you have other, like always a team fixes the mountain. So I used the fixed ropes. Of course, I benefited from that. I didn't have to break a single meter of trail, and but on the other hand, for me, it was important that I carry all my stuff by myself. I don't have a high altitude porter. I don't have a Sherpa. I have one tent with me. I don't have any help in melting snow, and pitching the tent. And of course, I never used and I never will use, I think, oxygen. That's for me, it's just it's doping, and it takes away from me the challenge these mountains have, because the challenge is the thin air. The challenge is not the difficulty on most of the routes. It's just that there is so little air, and that makes everything so much more difficult. So if I use oxygen, I take away from this. If somebody wants to climb with oxygen and wants to use Sherpa and whatever other help they want, I'm absolutely fine with it. Like, they experience probably the same joy, the same satisfaction when they reach the summit than I do. You know, but I think we need to distinguish between, yeah, these different methods of help. We can get there because they just turn a 8,000-meter peak into a 6 or a 4,000-meter peak if we use oxygen, for example, and that's just a huge difference on it. So for me, the one dream I had on an 8,000-meter peak was always to climb it in a really light alpine style with a small team, without oxygen, obviously, no fixed ropes, no porters, and not via the normal route. And that's why I put so much into Nanga Parbat, because this was for me like, yeah, one of these mountains where I see I could do this, because we were always alone on our route, on our side there, except the first year in winter when there was this other Polish team. And so for me, that was why also Nanga Parbat is now, with this ascent via the Schell route and alpine style, something I'm so proud of, and so happy I could prove, mainly to myself, that I'm able to do this. And just for transparency, and when I talk alpine style, because for purist alpinists maybe out there, this is not anymore alpine style what we did, because we arrived in base camp, and then the next day we went up to 6,000 meter and checked the conditions of the route, and we also put like a small deposit there. It's at our camp at 6,000 meters. We didn't establish camp or anything, but we just made this deposit there. Then we went down, and then a week later we went for a summit push. So that's where, in the purest sense, we kind of sabotaged our alpine style, because normally that's not what you allowed to do, that you check out the route before. But we didn't put a single meter of fixed ropes, and so for us it still counts as an alpine style. But again, that other people need to judge and decide.
Yeah, but like you said, there's no real rules, but there is a pretty critical community. People are watching to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, it's also okay. As for me, it's really, I find it a little bit, how should I say, it's really difficult, because at the moment you raise your voice or you criticize, or you point out, it's not often even criticizing, it's just like, hey, I want to make clear that this or that is maybe not correct. Immediately in the community, it's perceived as jealousy, or you don't kind of, yeah. And that is, I think, it's quite difficult then to really improve our way of how we evolve as a community, as a sport as well, when it's immediately always just like, yeah, when critic, even a positive kind of critic, is perceived as you're just jealous about this achievement of somebody else.
Yeah, well, and this has been, climbing, the history of climbing is full of, these kinds of controversies and how people did ascents. And, I'm old enough now that I lived through, the period where sticky rubber was not allowed. I mean, having sticky rubber on your shoes was, that was considered cheating, or chalk.
Yeah.
Using chalk was considered cheating in rock climbing. And so, yeah, I think this is, and that's probably because we are involved in a sport that doesn't have a hard set of rules.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's no idea where are the boundaries. And certainly, another question would be, or another situation, I mean, wrap bolting, bolting on rappel, and that was completely, you would have been, when I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, you would have been hung if you bolted a route from, by rappelling, and that just wasn't considered. And now, I mean, but the ethic, of course, changed then during the late 80s. And now there's so much more climbing opportunity for people because there's all these bolted routes out there that would never be climbed. You could never climb them from the ground up. So I think there's some pluses and minuses to all of this, but it is, I think, something to be aware of in our funny little sport, which it's hard to call it a sport, but because it doesn't have rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good. And I also like, it's good to have this controversy. It's always good for, for a talk, for a chat, and to discuss this thing. So it's part of it, and I'm okay with it.
But I think your solution to this kind of controversy of just be transparent about what you do, and don't try to cover up things. And I think as long as people are transparent, then we can know that how to compare one ascent to another ascent. Whereas if it was in running, we know that you can compare directly this time to that time for a runner.
Yeah.
And if if no one is using blood doping or some other artificial means, that we can compare these two people's races. Whereas in this, we have so much, as you said, much more gray area around what's permitted and what's not permitted, that it just, being transparent, I believe, is the best solution. Then you're not being judgmental of other people and what they do.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk a little bit about training, because that's the one thing I do know something about. And
you know a lot about, yeah.
we have experimented, I mean, with you and others, lots of different types of training methods, and and they evolved, and there's some of the things we do now that wouldn't have worked so well for you in the past. But one of the things that we settled on this year was weighted hiking on a stair machine. And I know this is a miserable type of training that I have a hard time recommending it for many people, even though it's incredibly effective. But why don't you talk? You're the one who had the firsthand experience of doing this.
Well, I mean, this is something we never did in this way before, I think, because it's really such a brutal sufferfest, like an hour on this machine with extra kilo in your backpack, and it's hot and humid, and I mean, I was sweating sometimes. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was embarrassing in the gym. I was this huge puddle around me. I mean, people came up to me in the gym and they're like, "What are you doing here? Like, this is like," and but it is so. I feel it is effective in two ways. The one is, of course, like your endurance, your physical side, but the mental side. I felt now, having these workouts done and suffered through it, really gave me always a boost when I did more or less the exact movement. And this is something we knew that on Nanga Parbat there are a lot of these sections where it's exactly this kind of movement, making the trail at this kind of, in these steepness, and when I was then on the mountain, I really had a lot of times this moment where I remembered like how miserable and what a suffer fest this these workouts were, where I thought to myself, okay, come on, this was so brutal. Now you know why you did it, and now you can kind of, apply the strengths you gained in these workouts. And so I think that was really helped me a lot when I had these moments when you're like, oh my God, how long is this slope here? And you need to make the trail, and come on, you keep going. And you're like, hey, you did this for an hour, so now you can do it at least for like 20 minutes or something like this, and then you do a break. And so that was really the mental side of it. The mental gains I had from these workouts were equally good as the other side. And then what we figured out throughout after a couple of these workouts, I changed. I don't know, you remember, I changed to ankle weights.
Yes.
And I think this is something I also really, really can recommend people to at least give it a try. Because it felt to me way better, because I didn't have to load my backpack this heavy, which is always then is really like hard for your shoulders, for your hips, for you, just like for all of this. And in the end, I had 15 kilos in my, like 15 kilos in my backpack. And then I had 2 kilos on each ankle. So it's 4 kilos there. And I think there is you can calculate how much weight on your feet equal a weight in your backpack. And I think it's 1 to 4 or something like this, or even
Yeah.
5. Like it's
1 to
because
5, I think.
like,
Yeah.
I think 1 to 5, no? And so it's like a lot of more weight. And also it simulates in a way that you have, mountain boots and crampons and snow sticking to the crampons and all of this. So I think that was for me the perfect simulation of what I had then to deal with in the mountains. And so, yeah, the best training for it.
And I will just take a moment to talk a little bit about my thinking on that method. So over the years, I've tried a lot of different training methods with people. One of the things, and this is going to be more in the theoretical side of our discussion about training, is that I believe that something that we all know that training specifically for a sport is usually going to give the best outcome. So, if you're training for a swimming race, you don't spend all your time riding a bicycle. I mean, that's just, those are two dissimilar. Both of them are great exercises. Both of them will help you be fitter, but preparing for a swimming race on a bicycle is a bad idea. And but what I have discovered is you can take this notion of what we call specificity, you can take it too far. And I've learned over the last probably 15 years that there are, in some instances, it is worth sacrificing some specificity to gain more control over the training. And so, in this, let's just use this example of the stair machine. Like we used to, with you, have you hike up steep hills, and I still believe that's great training for most people, is hiking steeply uphill with a heavy pack. That's a pretty simple exercise. However, we don't have a lot of control when you're doing that, because it's every step is a little different, and while that's beneficial to some extent from the technical standpoint, balance and walking on rough terrain, that's much more like mountaineering. But what I've discovered, and not just with this workout, but there's been others that I use with other athletes, like for runners especially, where let's just get a lot of control over what you're doing. In this case, every single step is exactly the same on that machine. And that means that those muscles that are propelling you uphill, they get massive load, and repetitive over and over, this exact same movement. And I think there's some real benefit to that, because the movement outside on rough terrain, not every step is going to be slightly different. So the muscles are going to be getting worked in a slightly different way. So we have two things that we can do. One is the sheer repetition, the thousands of steps you're taking that are all exactly the same. And then the other is, we can very carefully measure, because the machine tells you, okay, how many, they usually they do it in, I don't know what the machine you were using in Chamonix was doing, but they often tell in the number of floors that you've climbed. And, even I don't really know how they're calculating that. And typically a floor is 3 meters in architectural terms, but I don't know on those machines what a floor means. But as long as you're comparing the number of floors you climb this week to the number of floors you climbed last week, then and you can also increase the speed of those treadmills, very carefully, those stair machines. And so we can have this control of the movement, control of the speed, and control of the distance that would be much harder to replicate outside in the environment. Now, you have the advantage that you're already technically very proficient at moving in rough terrain outside. So we could, in your case, if I was very comfortable, let's sacrifice some of that very specific movement outside to give us this more controlled environment, a more controlled workout. Now, for people who are not accustomed to walking on rough terrain or with crampons on steep slopes, you still need to have that. The Stairmaster is not going to prepare you for the technical side of mountaineering. But I just really think that there's, in some cases, real benefit to sacrificing specificity to gain some control over the exercise. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree on this. A couple of things. I think still the outside workouts sometimes, especially like you said, when you're not used to it, if you can get them in, depends also like where you live. If you have a slope, especially for me, for example, I remember sometimes I go out when we have fresh snow in Chamonix, and there is like a lot of trail breaking, and just to get this mentally component of trail breaking, every step is maybe a little bit different. You sink in that you also, have experienced that is, I think, really important, because when you're then really on your expedition on the mountain and you have to do it there for the first time, you suddenly be like, oh my God, this is so hard and you're so slow and it's so exhausting. So you need to know also this side to it. But definitely the treadmill gives you this no mercy kind of attitude, where outside I just slowly down, and on the treadmill I have to actively press the kind of speed down kind of toggle to make it slower, which gives you this extra kind of boost of really being on this limit. And I think we should also talk about, because whenever I posted these workouts, I got a lot of questions like, what kind of protocol you use for this? And I always use like an hour in a constant, trying to hold a constant high pace, so I can go from the beginning to the end in this pace, always kind of on my limit of what I can do for 1 hour. And I don't know, like your take on this kind of, like the exact protocol or execution, if, because people were like, hey, you do intervals and you go faster, slower, faster, slower. For me, I found this the most effective, or that's at least what I did.
Well, and that's what I think you and I talked about this before, but that's what I have found. Even for mountain runners, we don't do intervals on stair machines. I think the benefit, especially for mountaineers, comes from just grinding away and an hour is plenty. Trust us, you don't need to spend 3 hours on a stair machine. That would be real punishment to do something really long. I think it's also nice to have a little entertainment to help break up the monotony of it all. But we have found, and I even for outdoor uphill hiking with a steep trail, heavy pack, I've discovered that, 1,000 meters or roughly an hour for most people is plenty of training stimulus. You don't Going way beyond that doesn't gain you very much. Um, and I want to go back to the specificity component you're talking about, breaking trail. That is critical. You need to have some of those types of skills, like walking on crampons and all of that, before you go attempt these big mountains. But I had a guy one time I was working with who had no mountaineering experience, but he lived near an earthen dam, not a big concrete dam, but an earthen dam.
Okay. Mm.
And at the base of the dam, to stabilize the soil, they had put all of these little rocks that are about, this like smaller than a soccer ball. And so I had him going up and down and traversing, walking on this loose, what we in the mountains we would call that scree or talus.
Yeah.
But I had him traversing around on this stuff with a pack on. And not many people are going to have access to something like that. But if you're creative, you can find ways to, walk on this rough type of terrain. One of the problems I think many modern mountaineers who go on guided expeditions who don't have a lot of experience, there's a big difference between walking on pavement and sidewalks and walking in the mountains. And it takes a lot. You kind of need to be efficient at that type of
Yeah.
walking. And most of us don't spend very much time. I mean, you're out there almost every day in the mountains, but most people don't have that opportunity. And I've been trying to come up with ways of helping people learn that. And unfortunately, I've not been able to find anything we can do in a gym that can replicate that.
Yeah, I mean, in a gym it's difficult, but what I can recommend as well, and I did it by myself sometimes, for workouts, for exactly this kind of ME uphill workouts. I use crampons also in the summer on a if it's a grassy slope, you can go really, really steep. And you train again the same movement as it would be hard snow. I have a pair of really old crampons, which are, I don't mind, what to do with, but I have the same footwear and I have crampons on my feet, and you can front point or diagonal technique and really, really can do a great simulation of being in the mountains with crampons. And I see it, on the normal routes, like on Everest. I saw it again and again. The moment, you have the yellow band where it's a little bit rocky on the normal route from the south side. You have around the Hillary Step and below, there were these kind of sections where it was like loose rock, and the people were struggling with this terrain just from their technical ability, because they have a lot of people which have the first time in their life crampons, and in snow it's relatively easy to get into that technique and in this groove. But the moment you have suddenly like a little bit rock, you need to know how to use these things on your feet. And so I can just encourage people to train this, and you can, yeah, like take a pair of old crampons or sacrifice one pair and make them to your kind of, summer crampons, and yeah, go out there, find some whatever slope and walk around with them.
Yeah, if people want to see a picture of you doing this, I used a photograph of you training this way on grass with a heavy pack to illustrate the article on our website about muscular endurance training. So if folks want to just see what I'm talking about, there's a picture on the website, and just go look for the muscular endurance workout. Maybe what I'll do is we'll link to it in the description of this talk, so you can just click on that and go right there. And one other specific thing, before my wife went to Everest was that 2002, I believe, I set up a ladder in the backyard so that she could, she was very comfortable in the mountains. Climbing and moving around with crampons was not a big issue for her. But most mountaineers will not encounter a situation where they have to walk on ladders in a normal climbing situation. So we did a little training just in the backyard, putting a ladder up with a rope hand line so that she could get used to stepping I've never done it other than in my backyard. I've never been on Everest, but that seemed to it helped her because when she got there, it's like, oh, okay, I know what this is going to feel like.
If for sure, it's all this like every small detail you can kind of train and simulate and prepare mentally and physically upfront will just take away a little bit of pressure, energy when you're really on the mountain. So for sure, all of these things. I mean, for me, is also I'm always surprised that people not more kind of go and sleep a night outside in the winter in a tent with a sleeping bag and try to figure out how to, get into the cold boots in the morning, and how does that feel like? How can I be efficient in all these small things? Because in the end, on an 8,000-meter peak, the smallest mistake can cost you your summit. And I've seen it again and again and again that people underestimate all these small details, and then they wonder why they had to turn around.
Yeah, that just reminded me
Mm.
of when I was a kid. I was planning a winter ascent of a big wall in Colorado on the Long's Peak on the Diamond, and so I went and set up a hammock on my back porch and started sleeping in the hammock in the wintertime. Just so, it was a climbing type big wall hammock, not a resting, not a summertime hammock. And just to get used to, okay, I'm going to be spending nights in this hammock. I need to be able to function. Like you said, if you drop a boot in trying to put your boots on in the morning, that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah,
So, we can do some of this sort of training without having to have mountains nearby.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, because that's
definitely.
a lot of people live in where what I call terrain challenged
Mm.
environment, and where they just don't have access to this kind of terrain.
For sure, there I feel very, yeah, lucky and and grateful to be always surrounded by mountains, more or less,
Yeah, yeah.
and have the opportunity to go right there. But yeah.
Well, what are your plans next? I mean, I think one of the things you and I have discussed, and we should be fully transparent, is that after a big expedition like this, it's time for a break. Mental and physical break, and the routine and the monotony of training can get to you. And especially for endurance training, where it's very repetitive, it's kind of boring, it's not very exciting. I mean, these things that we do often, they don't make good YouTube videos, um, and they're just not very sexy. But they're very taxing mentally and physically. And so I'm a big believer after a major event like this is you just got to step away, take a break, don't just dive, even though maybe you're excited about your next goal. But you're in that stage right now, correct?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel the urge of that I want to move, that I want to get in shape again, and all of this. But like you said, we said, okay, we don't put anything in Training Peaks. I mean, I upload my exercises at the moment. I go biking when I feel today is a nice day for biking. I go for a 1.5 hour run or something like this. I do a little bit, started to do a little bit of strength, slowly getting some muscles back, and but just like, by feel more or less, and not in this way that I see on Training Peaks. Okay, that's my workout for tomorrow. That's my workout for the day after. That's for the and so on. So I think I really, yeah, enjoyed that at the moment, and at the moment really it just needs to a little bit time to process the whole kind of Nanga
Mhm.
Parbat story, because it was really, it's such a big dream I could fulfill there, and yeah, like all these details which suddenly kind of you remember and come up, and you look some videos and pictures from it, and you're like, oh my God, this was this moment and that, and so all of
Yeah.
this at the moment is still happening, and I enjoy this time, and be, yeah, a little bit more relaxed about what comes next, and I haven't I haven't decided what's next from like the big expeditions, and but there will be definitely some, because I still have a lot of ideas and a lot of objectives and mountains I want to go either back or see the first time, and so yeah, I for sure it won't be long that I kind of start to plan the next thing, and that's then also the time when we sit properly down and pan out our training again.
Well, I find your Instagram, and I'm not a big social media person at all, but I find your Instagram post really entertaining. Some, whether they're educational or just beautiful or, fun to look at. So tell people how they can find you on social media.
Well, I mean, for me, the only social media I have is Instagram, because it's the only one which I enjoy also doing it, and there I share my kind of my mountaineering life and what I do there. And this is David underscore and then my family name Goettler, and that's how you find me there. And yeah, if you that's also the only platform where I reply to messages. If you find me on Facebook or somewhere, I never look into that. So yeah, go for Instagram to reach out.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that to folks. Yeah, I was
Thank
having
you.
the wealth of experience that you have in this area is so tremendous. I hope that we can get you back sometime to talk a little more about training, some of the specifics and other things we've done. I know I've taken up a lot of your time this morning for me, this afternoon for you. And, it may be that people want to, contact you to ask questions, but I think what we might, we've been doing this podcast about once a month, maybe, about once a month, where we take questions from listeners and from the audience, whether, and they're usually, obviously, they're normally training related. But if people have specific questions that they would like to ask David, send them in to the Ask Evoke or to the coach@evokeendurance.com, and I can pass them on to David, and I'm sure he'd be happy to give you some pointers.
Yeah, for sure. More than welcome to answer every question coming your way, my way, and thanks again for having me here.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and please give my best to Monica.
Will do. Okay. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.